Hearing will come to order. Good morning. Today, the House Armed Services Committee meets to hear testimony on the U.S. Central Command's strategic threats and challenges. By way of information for our members and guests, we will go as far as we can go until 10:30, then we'll recess to attend the joint meeting on the House floor, and then we will resume just as soon as that joint meeting is over. We explored with our witnesses maybe trying to rearrange this hearing. That wasn't possible, and so with y'all's patience, we will come back just as soon as the joint meeting is completed in order to continue the hearing. Over the past year, the developments in CENTCOM's area of responsibility have been troubling. The rise of ISIS, questions about future security situation in Afghanistan, the government of Yemen's fall to Iranian-backed rebels, and the prospect of a deal ratifying Iran as a threshold nuclear power all have created serious stress on our strategic position and on our alliances. Any notion that the U.S. could pivot away from the Middle East toward other regions has proven to be naive at best. Part of the challenge here is the absence of a comprehensive strategy across the Middle East. The limited approach that the President has taken has left instability and weak or failed states from Libya to Yemen. Many of those locations have become breeding grounds for terrorists, which is the opposite, of course, of what the administration has tried to achieve. As various actors in the Middle East and elsewhere follow our defense budget debates, one of the results of that has been more doubts about the reliability as an ally. What I hope to hear today is a comprehensive strategy, or at least the foundations of a strategy, which will help provide a roadmap towards a more stable Middle East led by responsible actors. These states have just as much at stake in defeating Islamic terrorism as we do. This committee also needs to continue to explore operational concerns we have about various AUMF proposals that contain restrictions on how we engage the enemy. I believe it's critical that we do not validate Iran's standing in the region by allowing them to have threshold nuclear capability. That has and will breed instability and increase security competition in both the Middle East and the wider geopolitical order. We cannot allow that to happen. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I agree with the Chairman. General Austin, you have the toughest assignment in the military. The problems keep cropping up in many places for, over a decade. We had the wars in both Afghanistan and Iraq. Those two areas are still problematic, but many others have been added since then. I think the Chairman did a pretty good exhaustive list looking at Syria and Yemen and other places. And getting back to stability in that region is an enormous challenge. I will say that I think it sort of defies a comprehensive strategy where you come up with the strategy and then you just automatically plug it in no matter what happens. The problems evolve. They move in different directions, and they are contradictory. Certainly, we are opposed to Assad's leadership in Syria. Bad leadership has led to all kinds of problems, but, the alternative does not look much more attractive. So what's your solution? What do you do? There are no easy answers there, number one. Number two, I think it would be a mistake for us to assume that it is either the U.S.'s responsibility or that we have the ability ourselves to solve these problems. This is primarily a regional issue. This is primarily a problem of governance, leadership, religion, all manner of different issues colliding in that region. What we have to do is see how we can be part of helping to move those countries in a correct direction to get to greater stability. This is not something that the U.S. can come up with a plan and then go in there and implement it and fix Syria or fix Yemen or fix Iraq. I think if we took that approach, that would be a mistake and would lead to greater pushback than it would to solutions. And obviously one of the biggest problems in the region, aside from the Islamic extremists like ISIL and al-Qaeda, is the Sunni-Shia split. Most exemplified by the split between Saudi Arabia and Iran. That complicates everything. I mean, offensive that we've just heard about launched against Tikrit is launched against ISIL. Obviously, that's one of our foremost enemies that we want to see defeated. One of the countries leading that offensive is Iran, another country that we're troubled by. How do you sort of deal with all of those different complex situations? And I think what I want to hear today personally is not that you have the answer. I'm not going to put that burden on you to say here's the strategy that's going to solve the problem. I want to hear how the U.S. can best use its resources to make the problem better instead of worse, understanding that it defies any sort of simple solution or defies any sort of U.S. solution. And let me just say on Iran, on the idea that somehow if we do a deal with them, we make them a threshold nuclear power. They've already done that. They made that decision and they moved forward. There is no deal that, I think the deal that everybody wants is where we go in and we tell Iran, you give everything up and we get to keep the sanctions on you. Well, I don't think Iran's going to go for that. So we got to figure out what's the best approach. And the approach the administration is trying to take is trying to contain them to make sure that they cannot break out and get to a nuclear weapon. If we don't reach a deal, the risk of that happening goes up exponentially because then Iran has nothing to lose. The sanctions are there. How do we monitor it? How do we pursue it? If we can get an agreement that severely limits their nuclear program so that we can be confident that they won't be able to get a nuclear weapon for at least a year or more without us first knowing that they're trying to do it, I think that's a significant improvement. If we walk away, the status quo is not to our advantage. There's no reason to believe that they won't expand their nuclear situation that could lead to even greater conflict in the region. Again, I'd prefer the answer that says Iran just walks away from their nuclear program, no questions asked. I just don't see that on the table. And I think that is but one example of the complex set of choices that we face here that defy easy answers, that defy a U.S. policy that's just going to solve the problem. So in a complicated world, like I said, I look forward to hearing what we can do to hopefully contain the problem and move things in the right direction, understanding the limitations of our ability to simply solve them. With that, I yield back.
I'm pleased to welcome back Ms. Christine Wormuth, Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, and General Lloyd Austin, Commander of the U.S. Central Command, as our guest witnesses today. Without objection, both of your full written statements will be made part of the record, and we would invite you at this point to summarize your statements before we go to questions. Ms. Wormuth?
Thank you, Chairman Thornberry, Ranking Member Smith, and members of the committee for inviting me here today to talk about DoD strategy and posture in the greater Middle East. It is a pleasure to be back here again this week to talk to you about a different and even more challenging part of the world. It's also a great pleasure to be here with General Austin. We're very lucky to have him serving as our commander in CENTCOM. He's also frankly, a terrific reminder of the overall quality of all of our men and women serving in the region today. As you all know, our forces in CENTCOM are confronting many difficult global security challenges. New realities have forced us to take a hard look at our near and long-term goals for our engagement in the Middle East. Although the Department will face many different challenges in the Middle East, as Ranking Member Smith noted, two issues are particularly critical and are at the top of our agenda. The first is how to degrade and ultimately defeat ISIL, and the second is preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. In Iraq and Syria, the Department is working with partners for a truly whole-of-government effort to try and degrade and ultimately defeat ISIL. We have over 2,600 U.S. servicemen and women currently in Iraq working with the government of Iraq, and more than 60 countries participating in our global coalition against ISIL. We are making progress. This is going to be a long-term campaign, and we need to be patient, but we are making progress. We have blunted ISIL's momentum. We've degraded its ability to mass and maneuver forces. We've pressured or eliminated its leadership cells, and we've disrupted its command and control and supply lines. In short, we've put ISIL on the defensive, and I think you're seeing that, and I'm sure General Austin will speak to that in more detail in various parts of Iraq right now. But countering ISIL would not be possible without local partners in the lead. U.S. and coalition partners are supporting the government of Iraq by assisting with training, equipping, and advising its armed forces. Last summer, we stood up our advise and assist teams to partner with local forces in the ISF and the Peshmerga, and early this year, we began training these forces at 4 different sites across Iraq. I traveled to Iraq in January and was able to visit one of the sites myself, Taji, where I was able to see firsthand the partnership that we have with Iraqi forces. In addition to our efforts in Iraq to go after ISIL, we are also working with our coalition partners in Syria, and we are also working to build the capabilities of the moderate Syrian opposition there. We expect the training of our first DoD class of vetted opposition elements to begin, we expect to begin training them later this month. Our forces in the region are strengthening our partners' ability to fight terrorism locally, but ultimately it's going to be Iraqi forces and Syrian fighters who will secure the gains against ISIL and inflict a lasting defeat. To support what we're doing, the President has developed and transmitted to Congress an authorization for the use of military force that demonstrates a whole-of-government support for him to successfully prosecute the armed conflict against ISIL within reasonable limitations. Enacting a bipartisan, ISIL-specific AUMF would provide a clear and powerful signal to the American people, to our allies, and to our enemies, and very importantly, I think, to our U.S. servicemen and women, that the United States stands united to degrade and ultimately defeat ISIL. And I look forward to talking with you more this morning about the AUMF proposal. Defeating ISIL is a major focus and challenge, but so is Iran in the region. As the President has made clear, his top priority is preventing Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. Iran's nuclear ambitions continue to be a consistent area of concern for us in the Department of Defense. We're hopeful that the P5+1 negotiations will result in a comprehensive and verifiable deal that will ensure the peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program. But at DoD, our job is to remain vigilant as well, and we do that by helping to underwrite negotiations with our robust posture and capabilities in the region, and we maintain a laser-like focus on that. As the President has said publicly, we will do whatever is necessary to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon, including the use of military force if necessary, and we're postured to do that in the region today. Beyond Iran's nuclear program, we have other concerns about Iran's activities in the region. They're engaged in a variety of destabilizing activities across the region, but also well beyond that. And even if we are successful in neutralizing Iran's nuclear threat through hard-nosed diplomacy, we will continue to support U.S. government efforts to counter Iran and the full range of threats that it poses to our friends and allies in the region and beyond. Even as we work to degrade and defeat ISIL and to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon, we're also at the same time committed to moving to a smaller force in Afghanistan and consolidating the gains that we have made there over the past decade of international support to the Afghanistan government. The U.S. mission in Afghanistan has helped support the Afghan people and has protected U.S. national interests by working with local partners to build up the capacity of the Afghan national security forces. It's clear that we still have a lot of work to do in the next 2 years, but I think we've made some very positive strides, and I'm particularly encouraged by the fact that President Ghani sees the U.S. and NATO role and presence as a very important part of his strategy to bring stability and security to Afghanistan. We're also going to continue to work with Pakistan and the Central Asian states to address existing and emerging threats in the region. Like Afghanistan, Pakistan is also facing a potent threat from extremists, I think something we all saw tragically with the attack on the school in Peshawar. We're committed to continuing to improve our relationship with Pakistan by collaborating where our strategic interests come together and engaging diplomatically where they don't. Meeting the range of challenges that we see in the CENTCOM AOR is going to take a lot of resources and effort, and it's important that we use those resources as effectively as possible, as Ranking Member Smith noted. The President's budget request for 2016 supports our strategy for the region and enables the services to continue to address our most critical needs, even as we get smaller and more capable over the next several years. If sequestration returns, however, in 2016 and beyond, the department's readiness would deteriorate markedly, which would harm our ability to respond promptly and efficiently when called upon. As a consequence, we would have fewer forces available to support operations and respond to crises in a region as vital as the Middle East. This is a very dynamic time for our policy in the region. It's a challenging time. The Secretary has signaled his commitment to working with our government and international partners to shape a more secure region in the coming years. We are clear-eyed about the fiscal constraints we're facing, but we believe it's necessary, even in the face of those constraints, to maintain our commitment to protect our interests in the region and to combat the threats that we face there. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. General?
Good morning, Chairman Thornberry, Congressman Smith, distinguished members of the committee. I want to thank you for the opportunity to appear here today to talk about the broad efforts and the current posture of the United States Central Command. Up front, and most importantly, I'd like to thank all of you for your continued and strong support of our men and women in uniform and their families. I look forward to talking about them and about the exceptional contributions that they continue to make on behalf of the command and our nation. I'm pleased to appear here this morning alongside Ms. Wormuth. Christine is widely respected by professionals throughout the Defense Department, both civilian and military, and we are most grateful for her support of our efforts at CENTCOM. I'll join her in making a few brief opening comments, and then we're prepared to answer your questions. Ladies and gentlemen, much has happened in the CENTCOM area of responsibility since I last appeared before this committee a year ago. Indeed, the Central region is today more volatile and chaotic than I have seen it at any other point, and the stakes have never been higher. The forces of evil that threaten our homeland and our interest in that strategically important part of the world thrive in unstable environments marked by poor governance, economic uncertainty, ungoverned or undergoverned spaces. And therefore, it is essential that we be present and engaged, and that we cultivate strong partnerships and continue to do our part to address emerging threats and to move the region in a direction of greater stability and security. And we must be properly resourced to do what is required to effectively protect and promote our interests. At CENTCOM, in addition to doing all that we can to prevent problems from occurring while shaping future outcomes, we spend a great deal of our time and energy managing real-world crises. Over the past year, we dealt with conflicts in Iraq and Syria. We transitioned combat operations to a train, advise, and assist and CT-focused mission in Afghanistan. At the same time, we dealt with a number of difficult challenges in Yemen, Egypt, Lebanon, and in a host of other locations throughout our area of responsibility. We actively pursued violent extremist groups, and we took measures to counter the radical ideologies that are espoused by these groups. We also dealt with Iran, which continues to act as a belligerent force in the region, primarily through its Quds forces and through support to proxy actors such as Lebanese Hezbollah. And while we are hopeful that an acceptable agreement will be reached with Iran with respect to its nuclear program, either way, whether we reach an agreement or we don't reach an agreement, Iran will continue to present a challenge for us going forward. We are faced with a number of challenges in our region. However, I firmly believe that challenges also present opportunities. And we make progress primarily by pursuing these opportunities. And we do pursue them. And I am confident that our broad efforts are having a measurable impact. Of course, the most immediate threat facing us now is a threat posed by ISIL or Daesh. This barbaric organization must be defeated, and it will be defeated. We are currently in the process of executing our regional military campaign plan, and I'm pleased to report that we are making significant progress. At the outset, we said that we would need to halt ISIL's advance, and we've done that in Iraq. We said that we're going to have to regenerate and restructure Iraq's security forces to help them reestablish the border, and we are in the process of doing that right now. We said that we would have to help our partners in the region to bolster their defenses against ISIL, and we continue to help our friends in Jordan and Lebanon and Turkey. We said that we would have to build credible ground forces to counter ISIL in Syria and to guard against ungoverned spaces. And we'll soon begin doing that as a part of our Syria Train and Equip program. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are making progress. In fact, we're about where we said that we would be in the execution of our military campaign plan, which supports the broader whole-of-government strategy that is designed to counter ISIL. And we're having significant effects on the enemy. Since commencing our air operations in early August, just 7 months ago, we've killed more than 8,500 ISIL fighters. We've destroyed hundreds of his vehicles, along with tanks and heavy weapon systems. We've significantly degraded his capability, his ability to command and control his forces, and also his primary sources of revenue, namely his oil refineries and his crude collection points. The fact is that he can no longer do what he did at the outset, which is to seize and to hold new territory. He has assumed a defensive crouch in Iraq. And although he has greater freedom of movement in Syria, he's largely in a defensive there as well. He's begun to expand into other areas, namely North Africa, and in part because he knows that he's losing in Iraq and Syria, and he needs to find other ways to maintain his legitimacy. And going forward, we should expect to see this enemy continue to conduct limited attacks and to orchestrate horrific scenes in order to create I.O. opportunities and to distract and to intimidate. But make no mistake, ISIL is losing this fight, and I am certain that he will be defeated. Again, he will be defeated. Having said that, there's still work to be done to get to that point, and we intend to continue to execute the campaign as designed. And I say that because how we go about this is very important. If we don't first get things under control in Iraq, where there is a government that we can work with and with some reliable security forces that are available, if we don't get things right there first before expanding our efforts in Syria, then we risk making matters worse in both countries. But done the right way, in light of the limitations that exist, I believe that we can and we will be successful in our efforts to defeat ISIL. And at the same time, we can be assured continued progress in pursuit of our principal goal, which is to move this strategically important region in the direction of increased stability and security. Going forward, we will all be required to make tough choices, and we'll need to find ways to do more, or at least as much, with less in the current fiscal environment. That said, I remain concerned by the fact that capability reductions can and will impact our ability to respond to crisis, and especially in the highly volatile central region, the resulting loss of flexibility makes the U.S. and our interest increasingly vulnerable to external pressures. And so I would ask Congress to do its part to make sure that we avoid sequestration and other resourcing limitations that serve to degrade the readiness of America's military forces. Chairman Thornberry, Ranking Member Smith, members of the committee, I want to thank you once more for the strong support that you continue to show to our service members, our civilians, and their families. They are the very best in the world at what they do. They continue to demonstrate absolute selflessness, and they make enormous sacrifices in support of the mission and in support of one another. I am incredibly proud of them, and I know that you are as well. So thank you again for this opportunity, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, General. We share your sentiment for those who serve our nation, including yourself. I don't think we have time to begin the questioning, so the committee is going to stand in recess until just after the joint meeting where we will resume. In the meantime, y'all please enjoy our hospitality as best you can.